So hello and welcome to this tutorial on Spring Data Neo4j. Here I'll show you how to build an application that stores data about songs and releases in music. And we'll start right off. So the first thing that I want you to do is go to start.spring.io, where you will find the Spring Inizializr. Here we can build a template for our project so that we don't have to do everything manually. I will use a Maven project and the newest version of Spring Boot. We'll leave the packaging as jar, and I will use Java 8. We will leave all the project metadata as it is. That's not so important for the tutorial project, but we'll have to add some dependencies. First of all, we'll add Spring Web. We'll not need it in this tutorial, but maybe later on. Then we'll scroll down to the NoSQL block and then search for Spring Data for Neo4j and add this one as well. Alright, so that's it. Those are the two dependencies that we need. And then let's just generate it. Right, so just download the demo.zip. So then we can just move this from our download directory to wherever we have our projects. It might be, you might use IntelliJ or whatever directory you want to use there, and then just unzip it. Right, so everything goes into the demo directory. Next thing I want to do is I want to spin up a Docker container. If you're not familiar with Docker or don't want to use Docker, you can spin up a sandbox online as well. You can use that as well. Or what you also could do is you could check out the little video that I made on Docker and install it and run with Docker on your local machine. Also for the sandbox, there's also a video where I explain how to set that up. So either way, you can follow along. I'll use Docker, so I'll spin up my container. I'll use Docker run. Then we have to map the ports, 7474. That's for the web interface. And then we have to map another port, that's 7687. 7687 again, for the Bolt protocol. Then I'll map a volume, and I'll map this volume to the data directory in the Docker container so that our data is persistent. I'll send the Docker container in the background. I'll also give the container a neat little name so that it's easier to deal with. And I'll use the Neo4j 4.1.9 image. That's already downloaded, so the container should spin up quite quickly. Yes, and there it is. So we'll log in with Neo4j and Neo4j. Then we will have to specify a new password because it's the first time we log in. I'll use pass. Alright, so there you go. The Neo4j database container is ready and we can put in the data. And for that, I need you to go to my GitHub repository. You'll find the link in the description below. There you'll need the data.cypher file and just copy the contents and paste it in here. So I'll do this as well, like this, and this will set up all the data that we need for our tutorials. Just send that off, and then you can check if everything's there. So you should have 4 releases, and there should be some songs connected to those releases as well. And there should be 1 song that's connected to both releases, or 2 of the releases. That's this one here. Now next off, I want you to open the project that we've just downloaded here in this demo folder in your favorite IDE. I'm using IntelliJ. Now this asks me if I want to trust the project, and yes, I do want to trust the project. Okay, so now everything is set up. let's just open this demo source main Java and then com example demo. Now for simplicity reasons we'll put every file, every class under this directory, but if you have a bigger project it might make sense to put sub packages in here based on the function of the classes so that you have a better organization in your project, but in this case this would be okay. Alright, so let's start off with writing our first classes. The first thing we want to do is we want to create so-called POJOs, so plain old Java objects. So these are just very simple Java objects that show the data, that represent the data that we want to work with. Right, so we'll start with creating a class for song. This will have string for the name of the song, and this will have a local time for the length of the song. And there's something important to say about the local time, because in the other examples within the database I used a time data type for the length of the songs. In the Cypher code that you just copied, the length is stored in a local time typed property. In the documentation for neo4j there is a table that will show you how the Cypher types are mapped to the data types in Java. So it just looks a bit nicer if we use the local time. Then we have to use local time on both sides, because if we use time on Cypher side, then we have to use offset time on the Java side, and then we always have the suffix in the time with a C at the end for Zulu time, and that's just not as pretty. And in general, this table is very helpful if you need to know which types to map from Cypher over to Java, so keep that in mind. Now the next thing, I just want to prepare a little thing here just to show you what we're going to need is, of course, a list of a certain type, and that will hold the releases. So this will hold the related releases for our songs. Okay, now this POJO is almost set up, so we'll create another POJO and we'll call this release. Alright, this one is pretty much the same as the first one, so we'll have a private string for the name, and then we'll have a private integer for the year. All right, that's it for this POJO. So let's go back to song. So what we can do now is we can set the entry here for our relations. So every song is related to one or more releases. To import the list type. All right, so now this is the property for our releases, for storing all the relationships. Okay, now to be able to use this with the database, we have to add a couple of annotations. The first one is node. So that tells our Spring Data Framework that this is a node in neo4j, and then we'll have to annotate this to say this is a relationship. The type of this relationship is appears on. So the type of relationship is the name of the relationship as you see it here. So this is what we call the relationship type over here. And then all the relationships in neo4j have a direction. So we also can set the direction in here. As far as I know, the default direction would be outgoing. So we only have to specify it if it's incoming, but for sake of completeness, I'll just define this as being outgoing. What we also have to do is we have to define a property for the ID. So as you know, every element, every node has an ID that's auto-assigned by neo4j. And this ID also needs to be reflected in the data model. So this is long, and it's an ID, and then we have to annotate it and say that this is the ID. Oh, I have to import that, and that it is a generated value that's generated by the database for us, so we don't need to take care about generating all of this. All right, and the last thing that we want to do to finish off this POJO is we want to create our getters and setters. So we'll create getters and setters for everything, and then just delete the setter for the ID, because that's auto-assigned, auto-generated, as we know. So now this one is finished. Let's head over to release, and then we need to do the same thing over here. So again, this is private long ID, and we'll just annotate that with ID and say that it's a generated value. There you go. And then we just need to tell it that this is a node. And then here as well, we'll just generate the code for getters and setters. There you go. Let's delete the set ID again. All right. Now the next thing we need to do to be able to access the data in the database is we need to create an interface called a repository for all the POJOs. So in this case, we just need a song repository. So we'll just create this interface, and this interface extends another interface that's prepared for us, which is called neo4j repository. And we need to tell the repository which type of data to use. So that would be song. And we need to specify the data type of the ID. So that would be long. And that's all we have to do. We don't have to put, for now, we don't have to put any methods in here. This is actually everything that we need to do to just tell the backend that we want to access the data. And there are a couple of predefined methods, you will see that later on, with which we can then query the data. Next step to access the database would be to set up our application properties. So we'll say spring.data.neo4j.uri. So this is the URI for the Bolt protocol of our neo4j server. In my case, this is localhost. Then we also need to tell the system about the username that we'll use, which is neo4j. And also the password that we're using, which is pass. Now, if you're using a sandbox, just go to this screen in your sandbox configuration, click on this arrow, and under connection details, you will find the username, the password, and the Bolt URL that you can use. So you can just copy this, put this one up here, and the password, of course, here. and then you can connect to your sandbox. All right, I'll switch that back to localhost and save it. All right, and then the next thing I want to do is we want to use a little trick to be able to show that our application works without setting up any big web interface. So we'll go to the demo application class that was part of the template. We'll make demo application implement the command line runner interface. So if we do that, we'll have another method that we need to implement called run. And this is a method that will be run on startup of the application, so we can put code in there. As the next thing, we need to define the repository up here. So we'll use the song repository, name it song repository. We need to generate a constructor. So this is auto-generated for us here by IntelliJ. And so what I want to do down here to query some data is let's go through all the songs. So for song in song repository and then find all. So this find all is one of the methods that I already told you about that come from the song repository, from this sort of template. So the backend already knows find all means that we want to get all of the nodes of this specific type. And then we'll just system out print line from song, just get all the names. All right, and that should be enough to start our application the first time and see if it connects to the database. So I'll just run this. And down here, we see a list of all the songs that we created. So this works already. Right, the next thing I want to do is for all the songs, I want to list the releases that they're on. So again, we iterate through releases and the release. And this, of course, comes from the song get the releases. And then what I want to do again is system out print line release, and then just get the name, and then we'll do a little quick and dirty indentation up front here. Save this and run it again. Now we need to stop our application and rerun it because of course it's still running and would be serving any web requests or whatever. And there you go. You see the releases for all the songs. And also what we see here, this song Hard Work appears on the Hard Work EP as well as on Hard Work itself. So this works fine. Now if we go back to our database, what we see that every relation has also a song number assigned to it. So the way we have it now is pretty much no difference to relational databases where we just have sort of a foreign key relationship with just the list of releases right there. On the release side, there is no information about the song number as well as in the song. In a relational database, we would use some sort of transitional table, and we need to do a similar thing here and use a transitional class. Not on the database side, only on the Java side, and then we can access the properties of the relationship. And what we need to do for that is we need to create another class, new Java class, that reflects the relationship, so we'll call it appears on, just like the name of the relationship, and this class will hold the integer song number. And what I did here is I've used the Java naming convention for the song number, and the name is different on the neo4j side. So it's a song underscore number. So we have to map this neo4j property to the Java property, and we can do that by another annotation that's called property, and then just give the name of the property on neo4j side, and that will map it to our Java property. So if those names are the same, you don't need this property annotation, but if they're different, you can, or you need to annotate it. The next thing what we need to tell the system is that we have a certain target node that this relation goes to. So this is release. And again, we need a little annotation here that this is a target node. Now, as a final thing for this class, I want to create the getter methods. Of course, later on, we also need setters here, but I will just create the getters for now. And in the more recent versions of Spring Data neo4j, we also have to define the type and the name of the database ID, so it's long and ID, of course. So if it's an older version that you're using, you might not have to do this. And it's also generated value. All right, and then just one more annotation up here. We need to tell this class that this is relationship properties. So this is our transitional class that we can use to access the properties of the relationship. So what we need to do now is we need to tell the class of song that this relationship has changed. It's now no longer a list of releases. It's now a list of appears on. And then, of course, getters and setters have also changed. All right. Now we get told that there's one more problem. And that's, of course, here where we iterate through all the relationships. We have to rename that to appears on. I'll also change this. Now to get to the name of the release, we have to go through the relationship. So this would be appears on and then get release. And get the name. And we want to put the song number in front. So this would be appears on, get the song number, and then just insert a space in here, quick and dirty. So if we run that, again, we see that this works. Now we have all the songs and the releases and the song number in front of it. And here as well, we see the song Hard Work is the first song on Hard Work EP and the fourth song on Hard Work. All right, so this little project is finished. This is the first step. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or remarks, you can put them in the comments below. If you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And you can, of course, also subscribe to this channel to never miss a video. And yeah, I hope to see you in other tutorials as well. Until then, enjoy programming.